Hello there everybody, and welcome back to another EDH gameplay video brought to you by Affinity for Commander. My name is Martin, and today we have a game for you involving a corrupt elemental, a completed Mir, a three-headed dinosaur, and a literal god. But before we begin, I'd like to personally thank all of the absolutely incredible patrons listed on screen for their heartwarming generosity. Without you, we wouldn't be able to continue making videos such as these, so thank you for your support. Also, if you decide to make a purchase from any of these websites, then be sure to do so via our affiliate links in the video description. It won't cost you anything extra, but it really helps out the channel. And if you haven't already, then go and check out altersleeves.com, where you can find thousands of super cool designs on perfect fit sleeves to really bling out your deck. Just be sure to quote us as the ones who sent you. But that is enough of that, let's take a look at those opening hands. I am playing my Brudiclad Telco Engineer deck, which aims to make as many tokens as physically possible. I can then make a token copy of a powerful creature and use my commander's ability to turn all of my tokens into copies of that copy. This will leave me with a formidable force to attack with. I keep an opening hand consisting of Hordling Outburst, Hate Mirage, Peering Kiran Nalar, Spawning Bed, Is It Boilerworks, an Island, and a Mountain.
Thomas is playing his The Locust God deck, which focuses on controlling the board with a large selection of counter and removal spells. He also runs a variety of card draw and wheel effects to make the most out of his commander's insect producing ability, and even runs a cheeky infinite combo or two to help close out the game. Thomas's opening hand contains Arcane Denial, Counterspell, Imprisoned in the Moon, Jace's Sanctum, Ash Barrens, Hall of the Storm Giants, and Is It Boilerworks.
Hugo is playing his Yarok the Desecrated deck, which is packed full of cards that have high value ETB effects. He is also running a nice landfall sub-theme which synergizes wonderfully with his commander's ability, and has a decent ramp package to help him stay one step ahead of his opponents. Hugo begins the game with a hand of Forehaven Elf, Fierce Empath, Scape Shift, Marsh Flats, Temple of Malady, Watery Grave, and a snow-covered swamp.
And finally, Jack is playing his Zacama Primal Calamity deck, which contains a frankly ridiculous amount of ramp, which is needed to help cast his 9 mana commander. In addition to this, his deck also contains a handful of cheeky combat tricks to keep him safe while he grows his land base, as well as a surprising amount of graveyard recursion, considering that he doesn't have access to black mana. Jack's starting hand is made up of Eternal Witness, Farhaven Elf, Traverse the Outlands, Temple Garden, a Plains, a Mountain, and a Forest. Jack wins the die roll and starts the game off by playing Temple Garden. He has the land enter tapped and passes to Martin.
I play a mountain and pass.
Thomas plays an island and basic land cycles Ash Barrens. He searches his library for a mountain, puts the land into his hand, and ends his turn.
Hugo plays Temple of Malady, keeping the top card of his library where it is with his scry trigger. With nothing more to do, he passes to Jack.
Jack plays a mountain and passes.
I play Spy Above Canal and end my turn.
Thomas taps his land to float blue mana, plays Is It Boilerworks, and returns the island to his hand. He then discards down to 7 and passes to Hugo.
Hugo plays Marsh Flats and passes.
Jack plays a Plains and casts Farhaven Elf. He searches his library for a forest, puts the land into play tapped, and ends his turn.
In my turn, I play an island and then cast Hordling Outburst. I create 3 1/1 goblin tokens in this way and pass to Thomas.
Thomas plays an island and passes the turn. Hugo responds to this by paying a life and sacrificing his fetch land, putting his Zagoth Triome into play tapped before moving to his turn.
Hugo plays a forest and casts a Forehaven Elf of his own. He puts an island into play tapped from his library and ends his turn.
Jack plays a mountain and casts Wood Elves.
If you guys could stop with the elf related ramping, that would be super.
He puts Stomping Ground onto the battlefield tapped and passes to Martin.
I play Spawning Bed and tap out to cast Hate Mirage. I choose both Hugo and Jack's Farhaven Elves as creatures that I'd like to copy, and Thomas responds by countering the sorcery with Counterspell.
There's been quite enough ramping at this table already, thank you very much.
Moving to combat, I seek revenge on Thomas by attacking him with all 3 of my goblins, and unable to block, he takes 3 damage. Absolutely livid, I pass the turn.
Thomas plays a mountain and casts Jace's Sanctum. Out of mana, he ends his turn.
Hugo plays a swamp and casts his commander, Yarok the Desecrated. Moving to combat, he attacks me with his elf, dealing me 1 damage, and passes to Jack.
In his turn, Jack plays a forest and then moves to combat. Here he attacks Hugo with his wood elves, raising an alarming amount of suspicion, and Hugo declares no blocks. He takes 1 damage, and Jack passes the turn.
I begin my turn by casting Pia and Kiranda Law, creating 2 1/1 Thopters with flying thanks to their ETB. Next I move to combat, once again attacking Thomas with my goblins. He takes 3 damage, and I end my turn.
Thomas plays an island and casts Imprisoned in the Moon, targeting Yarok. The elemental is transformed into a land, and Thomas passes to Hugo.
Hugo plays Watery Grave, paying 2 life to have the Shockland enter untapped. Next he casts Sire of Stagnation, to which Thomas responds by casting Reject. Really wanting his Eldrazi to resolve, Hugo casts Veil of Summer, and really wanting it not to resolve, Thomas casts Arcane Denial. A lot of spells are countered, and Thomas scries 1 twice with Jace's Sanctum. He puts 1 card on the bottom of his library, leaves a second where it is, and Hugo passes the turn.
In Jack's upkeep, Hugo draws 2 cards and Thomas draws 1 card thanks to Arcane Denial. Jack then plays a mountain and casts Search for Tomorrow, paying its actual mana cost.
A rare sight indeed.
He searches the library for a forest, puts the land into play tapped, and ends his turn.
I start my turn by playing Care Keep, and then tap out to cast my commander, Brudiclad Telcore Engineer. Moving to combat, I create a 2/1 Mir token with Brudiclad's ability, and then transform all 5 of my other tokens into copies of the newly spawned creature. Next I move to combat, attacking Jack with my Hasty Mirs and Chandra's Parents. Jack responds to this by channeling Sokkazen Crucible of Defiance, creating himself 2 1/1 spirit tokens. He blocks a Mir with each of his spirits and double blocks the Nalaws with his non-token creatures, resulting in all blocked and blocking creatures being destroyed. Jack takes 8 damage from unblocked attackers, and with nothing more to do, I pass to Thomas.
Thomas plays Temple of the False God and casts his commander, the Locust God.
Ironic.
With 1 mana remaining, he passes the turn.
In his turn, Hugo casts Lotus Cobra, closely followed by Coiling Oracle. He reveals the top card of his library to be an island, puts the land onto the battlefield, and adds a green mana to his mana pool with his Lotus Cobra's ability. Not yet finished, Hugo casts Fierce Empath, searching his library for Nyxbloom Ancient, and passes to Jack.
Jack starts his turn by playing a Plains and taps all 10 of his lands before casting his commander, Zacama Primal Calamity. The 3-headed dino untaps Jack's lands when she enters the battlefield, and Jack makes the most of the Elder Dragon's high power by casting Traverse the Outlands. He searches his library for 9 basic lands, puts them into play tapped, and passes.
I play an island, which I then use to cast Pongify, targeting Zacama. Not surprisingly, Jack responds to this by activating one of his commander's abilities, destroying Brudiclad in this way. Next he destroys Jace's Sanctum in the same way, and my spell finally resolves, destroying the dinosaur and replacing her with a 3/3 ape. With the biggest threat at the table removed, I cast Siege Gang Commander, creating 3 1/1 Goblin tokens with their ETB. Moving to combat, I once again attack Jack with all of my Mirs, and he blocks one of them with his ape. Jack takes 6 damage from the creatures that he was unable to block, and I end my turn.
Thomas draws, creating a 1/1 insect with flying thanks to his commander. He then casts Solve the Equation, searching his library for Mr. Confluence, and puts the instant into his hand. Happy with his turn, Thomas passes to Hugo.
Hugo taps all but one of his lands in order to cast Nyxbloom Ancient, and passes.
In his turn, Jack promises to deal with Nyxbloom Ancient if Thomas lets his commander resolve. Thomas agrees and Jack taps all his lands, floating 19 mana. He uses 11 of this to recast his commander, untapping all of his lands, and destroys Nyxbloom Ancient with Zacama's enchantment destroying ability. Next he casts Woodland Bellower, putting Corso Kruvix into play with the beast's ability. The top card of Jack's library is revealed to be a Bolt Bend, and Jack then moves to combat. Here he attacks Martin with his ape, and Martin declares no blocks, taking 3 damage. With an abundance of untapped lands, Jack ends his turn.
I begin my turn by playing Swiftwater Glyphs, gaining a life, and then cast Whirler Rogue. This creates me 2 Thopters, and unable to do anything else, I pass to Thomas.
Thomas draws, creating an insect, and plays Terramorphic Expanse. He then moves to combat, attacking Hugo with his insects and Martin with his god. Martin blocks with a Thopter, and lacking any flyers, Hugo takes the 2 damage. In his post-combat main phase, Thomas casts Blasphemous Act, and Jack responds by gaining 15 life with one of Zacama's abilities. The board is then wiped of creatures, and Thomas casts Prismatic Lens. Pleased with his turn, Thomas passes, and Martin responds by creating a 0/1 kobold with Kerr Keep. Thomas then returns the Locust God to his hand, and with no further interruptions, Hugo moves to his turn.
Hugo casts Wild Pear, and with nothing more to do, ends his turn.
Jack begins his turn by once again casting his commander, and Thomas responds to this by casting the Mystic Confluence that he tutored for oh so long ago. He chooses to counter Zacama unless Jack pays 3 mana 3 times, and unable to pay this, the dinosaur fails to resolve. Not to be deterred, Jack casts Eternal Witness, returning the Woodland Bellower in his graveyard to his hand. In a shocking turn of events, Jack doesn't have enough mana to cast any more spells, and passes to Martin.
In my turn, I play Spawning Bed and recast Brudiclad. Moving to combat, I create a 2/1 Mir and turn my Kobold into a second Mir before sending them both at Jack. He blocks one of them with his Witness, resulting in both of these creatures' deaths, and takes 2 damage from the unblocked Mir. With only a single mana remaining, I pass the turn, and Thomas responds by sacrificing his Terramorphic Expanse to put a mounting into play from his library before proceeding to his turn.
Thomas starts his turn by casting the Locust God, and pays 4 mana to activate his ability. He draws, discards, creates an insect, and ends his turn.
Hugo casts Mana War, returning the jellyfish to his hand with its own ability. He then searches his library with Wild Pear, putting Acidic Slime into play in this way. Hugo targets Thomas's imprisoned in the moon with the Ooze's ETB, tapping the enchanted creature to float a mana before he does so. Yarok is freed from their lunar confinement, and Hugo taps all of his remaining mana to cast Massacre Worm. Yarok causes Massacre Worm's ability to trigger a second time, giving all of Hugo's opponent's creatures -4/-4. Thomas and I both lose 4 life as all of our creatures die to the ability, and Hugo puts Thassa Deep Dwelling into play with the Wild Pear trigger, failing to find a second target with Yarok's ETB doubling ability. He then moves to his end step where he flickers Acidic Slime with Thassa's ability, destroying Thomas's Temple of the False God and Izzet Boilerworks with the Ooze's ETB.
Oof, talk about punishment.
Hugo's enchantment triggers and he puts Solemn Simulacrum and Muldrifter onto the battlefield in this way. The creature's ETBs trigger twice and Hugo puts 2 islands into play before drawing 4 cards. Pleased with his rather productive turn, Hugo passes to Jack.
In his turn, Jack casts Zacama for what feels like the billionth time, floating 4 mana before he untaps his lands. Next, he destroys Wild Pear with the Dino's ability, and casts the Woodland Bellower that he returned to his hand last turn. Jack searches his library for Tireless Tracker, puts the Scout onto the battlefield, and passes.
I play an island and then cast Rite of Replication, paying for the spell's kicker cost. I target Massacre Worm with the right, and Jack responds to this by casting Dualcaster Mage, copying the spell, and targeting Muldrifter. With this on the stack, Jack casts Bolt Bend, changing the target of my spell to Thasser. The stack then resolves with Jack creating 5 Muldrifters and drawing 10 cards from the ATBs. I then create 5 Thassers, sacrificing 4 of them to the Legends rule, and feeling very sorry for myself, end my turn.
Thomas draws, cries at his lack of mana, and casts Reckless Impulse. He exiles the top 2 cards of his library, revealing them to be Opt and Fact or Fiction, and then casts the Opt. Thomas drives the top card of his library to the bottom, draws, and passes to Hugo.
Hugo begins his turn by casting Sol Ring, and then casts the Great Henge. Next he casts Mana War, and Jack responds to this by targeting the Great Henge with Zacama's artifact destroying ability. In response, Hugo taps the Henge to gain 2 life and floats 2 green mana, and the $50 artifact is sent to the graveyard. Mana War enters the battlefield, and Hugo chooses to bounce Muldrifter and the aforementioned Jellyfish with their 2 ETB effects. Still not finished, Hugo evokes out Muldrifter, sacrificing it and drawing 4 cards. He then plays Temple of the False God as his land for turn and moves to his end step. Here he chooses Solemn Simulacrum as a target of Thasser's ability, flickering the construct in order to put 2 lands into play from his library. Having finished another ridiculously high value turn, Hugo passes, to which Jack responds by casting March of the Multitudes, where X is 13. He creates 13 1/1 soldier tokens of lifelink and proceeds to his turn.
Jack starts his turn by playing Urza's Power Plant, creating a clue with his Tireless Tracker. Moving to combat, he attacks Hugo with Zacama and Thomas with the rest of his 21 creatures. Thomas responds by casting Electric Revelation, discarding the Locust God to draw 2 cards, and Hugo blocks Jack's commander with Acidic Slime and Solemn Simulacrum. Before damage, Jack activates Zacama's ability to deal 3 damage to the blocking ooze and then discards Rubble Hulk to activate its Blood Rush ability. Zacama gets +20/+20, trampling over Hugo's Sad Robot to deal him lethal commander damage, and Thomas's life is reduced to 0 by the creatures that attacked him. Jack gains 13 life from his soldier's lifelink, and with 2 players removed from the game, moves to his post-combat main phase. Here he casts Rishkar's Expertise, drawing 29 cards, and casts Nissa Vital Force without paying her mana cost.
The value just keeps on coming.
Jack activates her -3 ability, returning the Rubble Hulk in his graveyard to his hand, and with nothing more to do, he ends his turn.
I draw, reveal my hand to be nothing but land, and concede the game to the Dinosaur King before me.
Rawr.
And that is that for another game. I hope that you enjoyed watching Jack uphold his record of being undefeated on the channel. Don't forget that there are 4 quick and easy ways of helping out the channel: liking, subscribing, hitting that bell icon, and leaving us a comment. I read every one. And if you really like us, then consider becoming a patron of the channel, where you can find exclusive rewards such as custom tokens and playmats for as little as $1 a month. That's all for now though, we'll see you next time. Stay awesome!